Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sexy Business Podcast. As always, I am Lewd Neko, and joining me is Spooky Dangerous.
Hello.
And today is going to be a little bit of a look at a game, like a first look, but also looking at the company behind it. We are going to be exploring Young and Naughty's Academy 34, which is a Overwatch parody visual novel. This is something I've been aware of for a while. I had a really old version of it downloaded. At one point, I think I went through like itch.io and just downloaded a bunch of like free ones that were popular. And this was one of them. And I haven't had a chance to play it until we decided to do an episode on it. So this was my first experience. I only got to play a couple of hours, unfortunately. However, I ended up exploring a lot about the company behind it. I actually used to be a pretty big Overwatch fan back in the day when I was in high school. It was one of the very few games that like some of my friends played, so we were able to play like multiplayer, and I really enjoyed the characters. As I think many people, that's why they got into Overwatch, is they thought the character designs were interesting. As many people know, Overwatch doesn't really have a plot, and it's really bad at character consistency. And I think you see that in like a lot of fan works where they're like, "Oh, this character never got developed, so I'm going to do that." And I think that's why the Overwatch fan community is really successful. And I think that's a lot of why this game worked for me, is that like, yes, it's very obvious that they had to, make it a parody, and we'll talk about how they had to change designs and stuff like that. But it was very much, it felt like a fan fiction or like a work of love where they're not just using these characters because hot waifu bait, but it really does feel like there's a lot of genuine like passion towards the project and towards the series, just based on what I've seen so far.
Yeah, my read into it actually is they're using the IP as a way to get bums in seats, and then the actual writing of how the main character interacts with everyone is actually kind of really wholesome and sweet. And so it's very different from what you would expect from a really garish porn parody of a popular IP. Which I think kind of works well, actually. Like, the people that want to play it because they really are invested in the characters and the universe or whatever are going to be pleasantly treated to it, instead of just, yes, this is Widowmaker with 9 million muscles and a cock larger than the average person, which is normally what I see on Twitter from Overwatch characters. Instead of this, which feels a lot more lovingly crafted. And you can go into a bit more detail about that, because there has been a lot of times where things have been not good enough according to fans, or they've wanted to change stuff, and they have really spent the time to go and make sure that it does and works like a good product.
Yeah, so I did a little bit of exploring on the F95 zone thread. I think it's always interesting to see like what people are sort of broadly saying about the game. And I looked at like some of the itch.io comments too, and a couple of Patreon posts. And this game has been in development for a while. I think it started in 2018. So there's a lot of context I probably don't know. I don't exactly have a full history of this game. But what it sounds like is, and you can kind of tell this if you look at some of their older art. For example, the Patreon header looks like older art, just based on the character designs. Is originally it was very much like, these are the characters from Overwatch, and we're making a fun little visual novel. But evidently, it connected with a lot of people, and a lot of people really enjoyed it. So it got, I think, probably more popular than they anticipated. And around, I believe, 2021 is when they started to change some of the designs. I'm not sure if they actually received like a formal lawsuit, or if this was sort of a preemptive, if we don't do this now, eventually it's going to bite us in the ass. Because they did say that they want to put this on Steam eventually. And like, especially if they put it on Steam, it would probably definitely get, tied up in a lawsuit. So they basically went back and started redesigning a bunch of the characters and redoing a lot of the art, and they changed all of the character names to be legally distinct. You can still tell who's meant to be Diva and who meant to be Tracer and May and stuff like that. But they've just had some elements of their designs changed, like their outfits, or their hair, or like Sombra's hair color in particular was changed to blue, though it sounds like they're going to possibly change that back because so many people were upset that she didn't have purple hair anymore. But these are actually really nice. Yeah, it is really good art, is one thing I will say.
I
It's
actually like the redesigns more than the original designs. I'm a hater, I
yeah.
guess.
I mean, I like a lot of the designs. There wasn't really any designs in the game where I was like, ah, that looks terrible, or like I wouldn't have done that. Like it looks like AU fan art to me. And I'm like
Hmm.
very like I was a Tumblr girly. Like I'm very much used to people being like, what if these characters were in college? And like that was like a very common AU for just like fan fiction purposes. So it's very much like happening here where, they're in more casual clothes. They've got like kind of more like modern like hair colors and or not hair colors but hairstyles. Some of them have also been like de-aged a little bit. So they've split up the characters into some of them are like the actual college students and some of them are like professors or like Mercy is the nurse and things like that. So like Hanzo, for example, his character is a student, but he looks like the young Hanzo skin, which
Hmm.
makes sense. And it's fun to see how they've sort of reimagined these characters. And they do include references to like some of their outfits through kind of like fun scenes and art. But like Spooky said, I really like the art here. I really enjoy the art style. I think it's a really good blend of sort of like Western and like a little bit of that like anime influence, which makes sense. That's very much like what Overwatch is, where it's like Western with some anime stuff kind of in there. I think it looks really good. The line art is very clean. The character sprites are also very expressive. That was like something I noticed is they have some like really funny and unique expressions in there, which is something that not many devs would take the time out to make like an expression that's going to be used like maybe 5 times in this entire porn game. So again, like this definitely feels like a labor of love, especially the fact that they had to go back and change some of the art, or like with the Sombra example, the fact that they're thinking about going back and redoing all of the art to change the hair color to purple again. I mean, that sucks and that takes a lot of time, but I think that shows that they are responding to what their fans are saying and trying to make this kind of, you know, very much their own thing, but still, tying it back into like the Overwatch characters that everybody loves.
Yeah, and I think it is good like that. And Young and Naughty suffers from some of the same problems that THM does, where when a project runs for such a long period of time, your vision of what the project is changes. So from the start of the project and what they had enough money for budget for and what capabilities and stuff that they had determined what the game was going to look like. And over time, as things changed, as more and more Patreon supporters came on, because they do have quite a lot now, they were like, well, actually, we could do better, or we could change this, or we could add more to this, but that means that we have to go back and rip up some bricks to put those bricks back again. And it still is this brick by brick problem where every single thing that you do becomes a thing that you have to undo to go back and change other stuff. But it slowly still builds this great big picture over time. And you have to pick, like, am I going to stick to my guns and commit to what's here, or am I going to rework this whole section or rebuild stuff? Which can be tough. And for some stuff, it's like replacing art. You're like, well, it's just going to show up in the same way in most places. But like redoing routes or like adjusting like more larger scale things can start to get really, really complicated. And when you spend time working on fixing old problems, you are not making new content, which is the main thing that your fans want. And so it's really, really hard to balance those things where it's like, as a patron, are you going to be happy spending the money getting that month's update that has no new content in it? It just maybe changes Sombra's hair color back to purple, which is a thing that you had already. Like, it's hard to, juggle and balance that kind of stuff, but it seems like they are doing a really good job. And it seems like the fans are really happy with how stuff is coming along, which is good. Most people just complain. 99.99% of them just have shit to say and very rarely say exciting or good things. So it must be working really well for them to go, okay, I've heard you. You didn't like this thing that we tried out. That's cool. We're going to change it. We're going to try something else until we get it right. And it seems like people have been patient with them and have been happy to experience it that way. Now, you and I both
I think
played it. Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, I think the other thing is we don't know exactly who's on the team. I couldn't find any
Yeah.
listing that specifically credits particular people. They say that they're a small team, and I think they reference that like they only have, I believe, like one person who works on like the code, for example, and I'm guessing like maybe like one or two people who work on the art for consistency's sake. But I think part of their strategy is also they are very good at marketing and they are very good at presenting their product. Like their Patreon updates are like a pretty gold standard of like how to make an update visually look interesting for all of their updates. And they also post them in the F95 zone thread, which I think is really smart to market to that particular like audience of people who probably haven't played for your game. But maybe if you like really push hard on your marketing and respond to them, you're going to convince someone eventually to actually support your Patreon. But all of their updates have like little animations and art from the update and sort of like almost like a news headline, which I think is cute. And then they have kind of a brief summary of what they did and like a couple of highlights of here's what you can kind of do with this new update. So for example, like the most recent one, it sounds like right now they are working primarily on sort of what they call an overhaul, where they're reworking some of the very early sections of the game to have like more consistent art. Or, for example, one developer rewrote 20,000 lines of code to like fix it or make it a little bit more like neat and tidy. Something someone actually pointed out in the F95 zone thread is that this game is really small. It's not like 50 gigabytes, and it sounds like that's because they've been coding it really well. So that's, something you don't always see with lewd games, where I've downloaded a lot of lewd games that should not be 50 gigabytes, but somehow are because they're just horribly unoptimized. But there's really like a lot of effort on all fronts, both the writing, the coding of the actual game, and the art itself. And they're doing a very good job at portraying that. One interesting thing I ended up finding out when I was exploring is they have a TikTok, and they have a fairly successful TikTok for like a lewd game, which is like, that's TikTok is very hostile to NSFW creators, of course. And this is like a, very hard niche to target, but it was interesting seeing them posting these like meme TikToks about their characters. And then people were like responding and interacting in the comments. So they have sort of developed, it's a sense of fan base, partially because this is fan work to an extent, so you kind of get to take advantage of the fact that you already have a fandom, and especially with Overwatch, which, as we all know, has a buzzing porn investment. That's how I think most people know it by at this point. But I think especially with like the comedy elements of their game, and we'll talk more about this in our experiences, but that worked really well for me for engaging with it. Like I liked that I could like smile and have fun with this one because it matches the tone of the original game.
Yeah, it does have a lot of goofy, light-hearted moments, both in like original Overwatch, because it's supposed to be quips between characters and stuff when they interact, and you only get like one or two lines of spoken stuff when that does happen, right? So it is kind of hard to build something off that. But Academy 34 does kind of fit that style into just like the regular experiences and stuff like that. Now, you and I both played the game, and as I understand it, did different routes. Because I, like you, had downloaded it ages ago, and then also again recently. I don't actually remember what I played ages ago. But what I did recently was I specifically went through Farah's route, a person whose name changed, I do not remember, which wasn't super long, but it was something that apparently that they are currently working on adding. So it must have been like the most recent content added. I just happened to bump into it. But I also clicked the just start me at the newest content option and bumped into another couple of other things that must have been from most recent updates, because what I wanted to was to just experience whatever the latest good quality stuff is, and I didn't want to get bogged down with stuff that was old or like from like updates ago that I had already potentially played. And also, Neko pointed out that there is a cheat code in the settings to just unlock the full gallery. So before starting the episode, I went and had a look through the whole gallery as well, and we got kind of an idea of some of the different scenes and stuff like that happened. So what characters and stuff did you get to spend some time with, and like kind of what was your opening impression?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I didn't have like a ton of time to play this, and I say unfortunately because I actually really want to engage with this more, but I started from the beginning, and I sort of like mashed my way through like the prologue, and I think I basically started a bunch of routes. So the other thing this game offers is it does have like a daily schedule and like money and like time system, like most dating sims. So you have classes every day that you should be going to, and you have ways to make money so you can buy things, so you can get certain routes. And then like each weekend you have the option of like what you're gonna do. Like, are you gonna go on a date with this girl? Or are you gonna hang out with your roommate? Or are you gonna make money? But if you don't want to do any of that shit, there is just a cheat code to get maximum money. So you only have to worry about like time at that point if you don't want to really invest in those mechanics at all. And that's what I did. And so the introduction is pretty typical. You go to this new like Overwatch college or whatever, and they introduce you to a bunch of the characters. So like in your first week of classes, you get to meet sort of the various professors. You slowly unlock parts of the campus. You get to meet like Tracer is like one of the first ones, and like Diva and Sombra. And right away, a couple of like routes sort of open up. The game gives you basically a little task list that will tell you like what you need to do for each route. Which is really helpful because, for example, some character routes are blocked off by other character routes where like you need to be at a certain point with Widowmaker before you can do this other route. And I think that can be helpful so players don't get like stuck or frustrated if they're like, oh, I really want to go for this one girl, but for some reason I can't figure out what to do with her. Or there were a couple of times where like I couldn't figure out exactly what I needed to do next. Like for the Widowmaker route in particular, you have to go to the shooting range and talk to McCree. And that wasn't super obvious to me at first. And McCree only shows up at certain times. So having that as like a little checklist was really helpful for basically being like, am I stupid or am I just not doing this right? Or does this route not exist yet? So I think that's a really good thing to have because it's optional too. So if you want to figure it all out on your own, you don't have to use it. Right away, I think McCree is possibly one of my favorite characters in this game, which is not their intention. Obviously, this is a female-focused game. However, for all my bisexual fans in the audience, there is a femboy route. So they have a couple of their OCs in this game. I think there's about like, there's a bunch of background characters. I think there's about 4 or 5 routes that are just original characters to kind of add in a little bit of spice. And they added an optional femboy route, and it looked really cute. The art was really nice, very sweet, very wholesome. And they have committed, and they have it on their timeline, that eventually, and kind of probably, I would guess, maybe in summer or fall of this year, they're going to be starting work on a male route. So one of the, Genji or Hanzo or McCree, I'm guessing, will probably be like some of the candidates. And I would guess McCree is going to be the one that's going to get voted on. Like, honestly, I will pledge to their Patreon during that month to cast my vote. I just think he's so cute. And they do gay bait a lot with him. So one of the things they worked on in the overhaul was actually the introduction, is they wanted your roommate to have more of a character, because that's what McCree is. He's your roomie. And so they added a couple of like hanging out scenes to the prologue, so that way you had something else that was kind of going on. And there's a lot of these like gay baity, like no homo bro sorts of moments. And so it very much feels like they want to write that route, and I would love to see how they do that. And I think it's nice that even if they're like, yeah, we full transparency, of course we're focusing on the female characters because that is what 99% of our audience wants. But the fact that they're acknowledging that there is like a portion of their audience that would be into that, I think is really cool. Especially because Overwatch had such a big like LGBT fan base. It's nice to see that. So, but other than that, like I said, I didn't unfortunately get to like too many sexy scenes because I just sort of started a lot of character routes. And that is one thing I'll say, is this is not the kind of game where you're gonna get a sex scene in the first 10 minutes. So if you're looking for that, you can of course unlock the gallery. So if you are only here for the art, the game has an answer for you. You don't have to go through any of the text. But if you're someone who wants to play the game naturally, I would expect to probably wait a couple of hours before you get like a hardcore sex scene. One of the only things I could see is Sombra has some art you can purchase from her that's like lewd fan art. And eventually she kind of gives you, I think you have to pay her or do some stuff on her quest line, is she hacks into Diva's like cam show essentially, and you can pay money to Diva's cam show to see a couple of images of what happens. So that was like most of the NSFW I saw. But I'm sure there was probably a bunch around the corner if I had maybe focused on a single character a little bit more instead of just bouncing between all of them. So if you are like really wanting to get to like the stuff as soon as possible, I would probably recommend like focus on whoever your waifu is and just dedicate all your time to her. And I'm sure you'll see lots of fun stuff soon.
Yeah, it does seem to be like the classic dating sim strategy. I didn't walk into it intending to follow a particular character's route. I kind of wandered around a little bit. I saw some Mercy scenes, but they were very clearly old art, and they weren't. They were animated, but it was like 2 frame animation of like out and in, and it alternates between them, compared to some of the other stuff, which is like much different and much more prestige. I also caught the end of the Diva route. My understanding is because I clicked the start at whatever the new content is, it sets all of the routes to whatever was complete before this update. So I just got to start at whatever the end of the Diva route was. So I saw basically a cream pie scene between Diva and the main character. And also, there's like a photo shoot with May that I got to see as well. And it's really funny coming into that and not having any context and like, oh yeah, we fuck now. I'm like, all right, sounds great. And kind of doing it that way. But the actual route that I ended up kind of playing through, because I think it was just I organically bumped into it, because all the other stuff that I had was like, this is the end of the route, or this is something else, or this is not ready yet. You meet, I think it's Zahira is her name, or Farah is the character, and it's like she's played as like a sporty girl, and you're tapped to be like a trainer or assistant or something to her, and she reveals to you that she was very, very sick before this, and that's why she needs the help. And you're like doing stuff to kind of help her stay on track. You're making sure that she takes breaks, you're making sure that she's hydrated, and her reaction is that she's surprised that you actually care about her and stuff like that. And then as it kind of progresses, she reveals that she's gay and then sees you in the showers, you a man, and is like, what the fuck? Why is he built like that? I want that inside of me. Which is kind of really funny that I somehow picked the fucking... In this and in Shattered Minds, I picked the exact scenes with the character, which is the lesbian turned straight. It's not intentional, I swear to God. And then in said same shower scene, she basically asks you to wash her and tries to be super erotic and try and make you have sex with her, but you're not interested and completely oblivious. And you go, cool, good job, you're washed now, goodbye. And she's like, what the hell, man? What am I doing wrong? And it's like really funny because she's like, how did I do this wrong? How did you stand me up? How were you not interested? And then you come back later, it's the same thing. You're in the shower, and she's like, for the love of God, please fuck me. And he's like, what do you mean? I barely know you. Shouldn't we spend more time together? Kind of stuff. And she's like, no, I don't want any of that. I just want you to, rearrange my insides. And it's kind of like played off in a really funny way where she's trying to be like a Sundara archetype. She starts out really grumpy. You don't really like each other. And then she kind of warms to you over time. And instead of like actually being sweet and caring about you like some Sundara arcs kind of end, instead she just wants to fuck your brains out. And the main character is just kind of wholesome in like every interaction that I have.
He's a cutie.
Yeah,
he's
like
so sweet.
Really wholesome. He's like way more interested in dating and getting to know people and having proper romantic entanglements instead of weird sex and stuff.
He's like to me he's a really good like middle ground between like the visual novel protagonist I hate the most, which is like the loser who's like always like angry and like wants revenge. Nobody likes him, and then something happens, or he's like completely pathetic and he can't interact with women at all, but
Yeah.
somehow they all still want him. Or like on the other hand, you have like the alpha Chad who is like ripped and buff and is like peak masculinity and doesn't experience emotions. Like he's right in between where, he's definitely a little bit more like I guess like quote unquote like femme or like sub leaning. There
Yeah.
are both dom and sub scenes though, and we can talk about that in a second. But like he's like still like masculine in his own ways, and he's just a fun character to be. Like I was like really interested in like how he was interacting with everybody, and there's also some really funny moments with him, which I think helps to kind of like make you want to like or root for the main character, even if you don't personally identify with him. Because I have a very different experience with these visual novels where, like, because I'm playing as a man in like 90% of them,
Mm.
I can't really identify like as the protagonist. And so many cases, I'm viewing it more like a voyeur, where I'm like, I want to watch the romance between main character and all of these girls. And so if the main character is like, actively disgusting or really like plain and uninteresting, it takes a lot away from the game for me. So that was one thing I really liked. I think they did a good job with their pro tag.
They also do something which is all of the characters and love interests more specifically do kind of have rich inner lives of their own, which doesn't always include you. A thing that a lot of media kind of fails at. I want to give two movie examples of this. I know we're towards the end of the episode, but I like derailing. The first movie example is Baby Driver. I don't know if you've seen this one, Neko.
I've seen that one.
Yeah, so basically the main character does all this crime and then says, "Hello, attractive girl, would you like to ride off into the sunset with me?" And she's like, "Of course. We've only exchanged one line of dialogue before this. I know absolutely nothing about you. I have absolutely no character development at all in the entire movie, but yeah, absolutely. For no reasons beyond this, I'm going to agree to come and leave everything behind for you." And it just makes no sense. And all the letterbox reviews kind of say the same thing, which is really funny. And so the love interest has absolutely no rich inner life, and so the actual romance is kind of based on nothing. She becomes an achievement or a possession, which I really obviously dislike. Whereas the opposite of that is Lisa Frankenstein, which came out recently, and I watched it. It was great.
I've also seen that.
Yeah, a banger, 10 out of 10 experience. But it does a really, really good job of showing what the teenage girl experience is like in looking at romance and her perspective on the problem and stuff that she's dealing with. And she really does have a rich inner life where she's dealing with problems, and she communicates her desires and the things that she's trying to accomplish, and the struggles that she has with the other characters and stuff like that. And I think that that's something that Academy 34 does kind of well, where it introduces the characters as a thing that would exist without you, as if they're on a trajectory and would continue to be on such without your interruption. And then you're presented with an opportunity to get to know what that trajectory is and see if you want to align with them. Unlike most other dating sims, where it's like, talk to me 5 times and sex falls out, this feels a lot more like an actual romantic entanglement.
Yeah, like I mostly skimmed through a lot of the writing because I just kind of wanted to see what the progression of the story was like. But even from the parts I kind of sat down and actually read, it was really fun dialogue. They didn't feel like particularly like cheesy or like played out or tropey, which is something I think you would expect, or at least I didn't expect this game to be written well. Like, I'm gonna be honest, I looked at the title, I was like, oh, this is playing off of the fact that it's Overwatch, and so it's gonna be really focused on just like looking sexy,
Yeah,
and the story is kind of gonna be like whatever.
Has great dialogue. Right.
But yeah, like the fact that I laughed out loud at a couple of different scenes just from the introduction was really surprising for me. Like, because like I don't normally laugh like audibly when I'm playing a game. Like I only do that if I'm with friends. And that was the thing that really took me off guard. Is like, oh, I'm really engaging with this. And I think especially because like I was an Overwatch fan and I've been as many people are, really disappointed with Blizzard, especially since they canceled the story mode. This is kind of like filling the gap for me in a weird way, where I'm like, these are the kinds of character interactions I wanted to see. Maybe not a high school, or not a high school, but a college necessarily. But we still get some of that same vibes and energy that I got from when I really enjoyed the game and the fandom. Like it's really a love letter, and I think that's what I like the most about this team and the work they've done. Would highly recommend it. There is a free version that is available, so you don't have to purchase the Patreon version. You just get the newest update if you do purchase it. And honestly, like I said, I think this would be a game I would consider investing in because the demo got me. It convinced me. I was like, this is good. This is a worthwhile product. And I don't know, maybe over the summer I'll get to play a little bit more. Maybe we can revisit this in like 6 to 12 months and see what's happened and have a little bit more experience and talk a little more in depth about the characters because I didn't get to see too many of their actual complicated storylines, but I do know that they exist.
Yeah, I would like to go back and revisit some of the games that we've covered because a lot of them do are not live service like we are, but like do receive semi-regular updates and have new content and new stuff happening. So it would be cool to kind of go back and look at it and see what's changed, what's been added and stuff like that. So if you're a fan of the show, you've been watching and maybe there's an old episode or an old game in particular that's come out and you really want to see us revisit it, do let us know in the comments. We're always thinking about, what kind of things happening, what kind of stuff do we want to come and show off on the show because it really is putting a spotlight on one thing in particular. And this was a game that I felt deserved a spotlight because it is very, very good. It does a really unique job at playing away from what you might read just looking at the box of something like this. You go, is it a porn parody? Well, yes, but does it play like that? Does it, is the experience in that kind of way? No, this is not a Newgrounds Flash game that features a character from the Mario franchise. This is a fully realized game that has a story and interesting takes on who these characters would have been in this new time period. And I think that makes it a really unique and interesting, play experience. And I enjoyed it a lot. Neko enjoyed it a lot. And so maybe in a couple months, maybe in this big overhaul is another couple of updates deep, maybe we'll come back and we can have a look at it again. But for now, that's it from us here at the Sexy Business Podcast. So if you're interested in more of the cool things happening in the sexy business, stick around, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, check out some of the episodes that we've got going on. They're probably on screen right now. And then we'll see you next week back with another cool episode of the Sexy Business Podcast.
Bye.